Hi Ma'am Cruz, I'm Angelie Cruz from Group 7 and I'm here to discuss the Lesson 3 entitled The Designing Performance Task. Now let's proceed to the lesson objectives. So for the lesson objectives, at the end of the lesson, students are expected to explain the definition of a performance task assessment and identify its four integral parts. Differentiate the various types of performance task assessment. And last is to formulate a strategy to use performance task assessment to gauge student learning. So now we can start our lesson. Let's begin with the learning activities. First is activate. Assessment in the MTBMLE is fully grounded on the measurable performance standards that is interpreted into a more detailed and task-specific learning. For the competency based on the identified non-negotiable content is standard. The performance standards provide the baseline for the frequency of assessment. So it consequently plans for instruction is integral to a full cycle learning experience of the learner, and plan for assessment is intrinsic to meaningful learning. So at this point, you are very familiar with performance task or assessment with your seatmate. So you can discuss how you understand a performance assessment. So a performance assessment is one of the most effective means of measuring meaningful learning in the classroom. It is to design and provide performance tasks to young learners that will allow them to demonstrate their learning. So for mother tongue, it is crucial that learners are given opportunities to demonstrate what they can do at their appropriate level. They should be given ample chances to interact or socialize and use the target language. So in this case, the mother tongue is frequent as possible. So for this lesson, instructional materials needed here is none. Now let's proceed to the second bullet, which is the analyze. John B. Watson is the father of the behaviorism, which quoted saying, "A psychology is a purely objective experimental branch of natural science. The position is taking here that the behavior of man must be considered." In this reference, Watson is saying that in order for psychology to be scientific, it must focus on a person's observable behavior. It must provide measurable evidence to signify an individual's thoughts, beliefs, and learning. So in effect of this, he is indirectly saying that a person must repeatedly perform a behavior before one can say that a learning has occurred. So the goal of this activity or analyze is to discuss your thoughts about the performance task to your group mates. Choose one sample instructional plan to read and analyze by focusing on the performance task or designed by the teacher. Para sa unang halimbawa ng design performance task, narito ang sample instructional plan 1. Ang banghay-aralin sa MTB-MLE, unang markahan, unang linggo, unang araw. Para sa layunin, nabibigkas na ang tamang huni ng mga hayop na nasa larawan. Sa layuning ito, isasaad ng guro ang nais matutunan ng kanyang mga estudyante. Pangalawa ay ang paksang aralin. Ang paksang aralin ay naglalahad o dito tutukuyin yung paksa, yung tamang pagbigkas ng wika, gamit ang pakikinig ng mabuti sa kwentong babasahin, yung kaalaman sa tunog, sa paraan ng pagpapakilala sa huni mula sa ipinakitang larawan ng mga hayop, pagkilala ng tunog sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigkas ng tamang huni ng mga hayop. So ilalahad ng guro ang tamang pagbibigkas o tamang pagbigkas ng mga huni ng hayop at pagkilala sa tunog. Dito din nakasaad yung sanggunian kung saan kumuha yung guro ng mga source na gagamitin para sa pagtuturo niya ng araling ito. Dito din nakasaad yung mga kagamitang gagamitin niya sa pagtuturo. Halimbawa na lang yung mga larawan ng iba't ibang hayop, yung flashcard ng mga huni ng mga hayop. At sa huli, isasaad ng guro yung pagpapahalaga para sa araling ito. Halimbawa ay yung pagmamahal at pag-aalaga sa mga hayop. Pangatlo ay ang pamamaraan. Sa pamamaraan, na nakapaloob dito yung pagbabalik-aral at paghahawa ng balakid. Sa pagbabalik-aral, magbabalik-aral ang guro sa pamamagitan ng pagkonekta nito sa mga pangyayari at nakikita sa paligid at magpapakita ng sitwasyon. Halimbawa nito ay yung pagtatanong o tatanungin ng guro ang mga bata kung ano-ano ang mga hayop ang nakikita nila bago pumasok sa paaralan. Sa paghahawa ng balakid naman, magpapakita naman ang guro ng mga larawan ng mga hayop. Panghuli, mag-iiwan ang guro ng takdang aralin. Halimbawa na lang is yung pagdidikit ng mga larawan ng mga hayop sa kwaderno. Sa huli, isasaad o ilalahad ng guro yung mga bilang ng mga mag-aaral mula sa kabuuang bilang ng mga nakasagot at nakakuha ng matataas na marka sa bahagda ng pagkatuto ng bata sa araling ito. Sa pangalawang sample of Instructional Plan 2 sa Banghay Aralin MT-BMLE, ito ay yung mga pinagsanib na aralin sa ESP at Art sa unang markahan at ikalimang linggo at unang araw. Sa layunin, dito papasok yung pagkakasunod-sunod sa wasto at tamang pagkain, yung pakikilahok ng mabuti sa pagbasa sa pamagitan ng pagkokomento. Ang pamagat ng araling ito ay ang pakikilahok na mabuti sa pagbasa sa pamamagitan ng pagkomento. So sa layunin, isasaad na guro yung tamang pagkakasunod sa wastong tamang pagkain sa pakikilahok sa mabuti sa pagbasa sa pamamagitan ng mga tamang sagot, tamang o wastong pagkokomento. Sa paksang aralin naman, papasok dito yung bahagi na kung saan tutukuyin ng guro ang paksa, sanggunian, gagamitan at ang pagpapahalaga sa pagkain ng wasto. Sa pamamaraan naman, sa bahaging ito, magbabalik-aral ang guro ukol sa pinag-aralan kahapon. Sa pagganyak ay may mga nakahandang tanong ang guro. Halimbawa nito ay, anong gulay ang iyong kinakain? Anong paborito mong gulay? At paano ang tamang wastong pagkain ng gulay? Sa huli naman ay ang pagpapahalaga na kung saan ipapakita ang paghahawa ng balakid. Sa pagsasanay, ay maghahanda naman ang guro ng isang aktibidad tulad ng pangkatang gawain. Kasunod nito ay ang pagtataya o isang formal na aktibidad na sagutan. Sa pagsasanay, papasok naman dito yung isang gawain na kung saan malalaman ng guro kung naintindihan o may naintindihan ba yung mga mag-aaral niya sa araling pinag-aralan sa araw na iyon. Pagkatapos ng pangkatang gawain, ang guro naman ay maghahanda ulit ng panibagong aktibidad kung saan maggagawa siya ng mga formal na aktibidad na sagutan. Ito yung pagtataya, magbibigay siya ng mga tanong. Halimbawa dito yung tama o mali, malungkot o masaya. Pagkatapos ng pagtataya, mag-iiwan ng guro ng isang takdang aralin upang magkaroon ng paghahanda ang mga mag-aaral para sa mga susunod na aralin. Para sa panghuling sample of instructional plan, narito ulit ang banghay aralin sa MTB-MLE, unang markahan at ikalawang linggo at unang araw. Para sa layunin, nasasabi ang kahalagahan ng pagsunod sa bilin o pangaral ng magulang. Nasasagot ang mga tanong na ano, sino, bakit at paano sa kwentong napakinggan. Ang huli ay nakikilahok sa talakayan pagkatapos ng kwentong napakinggan. Pangalawa ay ang paksang aralin. Sa paksang aralin, ilalahad ng guro ang mga paksa, tutukuyin ang mga tamang pagbigkas ng wika at kaalaman sa tunog nito. Halimbawa, dito ay yung mga pakikinig ng mabuti sa kwentong babasahin, pagkilala sa tunog mula sa ipinakitang larawan ng mga bagay, at pagbigkas ng tamang huni ng mga bagay. Para sa pagpapatuloy ng paksang aralin, sakop din ito ang sanggunian, mga kagamitan at pagpapahalaga. Sa sanggunian, gumamit ang guro ng K-12 curriculum o libro para sa K-12 curriculum sa pahina 16. Sa mga kagamitan naman, gumamit ang guro ng mga iba't ibang larawan ng mga bagay na gumagawa ng tunog o kaya chart. Sa pagpapahalaga naman, isinaad ng guro ang pagkamasunurin sa bilin o pangaral ng mga magulang. Sa pangatlo ay ang pamamaraan. Sa pamamaraan, papasok ang paghahawan sa mga balakid, pagganyak at pagtalakay sa mga aralin at paglalapat. Halimbawa dito ay yung pagpapakita o sasabihin ang kahulugan ng mga salita sa kwentong gamit ang kilos o larawan. Sa pagganyak, magaganyak ng isang tanong ang guro para sa aaralan nila sa araw na yon. Halimbawa, bago kayo pumasok sa paaralan, ano ang madalas sabihin o bilin sa inyo ng inyong nanay? Tatalakayin ito ng guro at sa huli ay ang paglalapat o pagpapaikli ng mga aralin. Para sa pang-apat na gawain o bahagi ng instructional plan 3 ay ang pagtataya. Halimbawa ng pagtataya ay yung magpaparinig ng isang maikling kwento, ipasasagot ang mga tanong sino, ano, saan, bakit at paano. Sa parteng ito, magpapagawa ang guro ng isang aktibidad upang makita niya kung may natutunan ba talaga ang mga mag-aaral sa aralin kanilang itinalakay. Sa huli, mag-iiwan ang guro ng isang takdang aralin. Sa takdang aralin na ito ay ihahanda ng guro ang kanyang mga mag-aaral para sa susunod na aralin. Halimbawa nito ay yung mga pagguhit, ang paborito mong larawan sa eskaparate ni Alex. Ngayon ay tapos na tayong talakayin ang design performances at mga halimbawa nito. Narito ang ilang mga katanungan. In your opinion, why do you think John B. Watson said the quotation above? And why is observable behavior important for him? Watson's emphasis on observable behavior can be contributed to his belief in behaviorism, a psychological theory that focuses on the study of observable behavior. So, ibig sabihin, itong quote niya ay nakapokus lang sa observable behavior at sa paniniwala kung saan possible itong sa pagkakaintindihan nila at sa predict of human action based sa stimuli and responses na individual experience in their environment. Pangalawa is, in your own word, how will you define observable behavior? How will you define performance? So, observable behavior refers to reactions or responses that can be directly seen, heard, or otherwise measured by an observer. So, include dito ay yung mga visible or audible action that can be objectively observed and recorded. On the other hand, yung performance refers, naka-refer to the execution of a task or activity that demonstrate a person's skills, abilities, and competence in a specific area. Pangatlo, why do you think are the crucial elements for a behavior to be performed and why? Several crucial elements contribute to the performance of a behavior. So, this element is crucial for a behavior to perform because they interact and influence each other in complex ways. Understanding these elements can help in predicting, modifying, and promoting desired behaviors in individuals. So, ang kino-consider dito is yung mga factors ng researchers, practitioners, and yung mga design of intervention and the strategies to facilitate the performance behaviors that led to positive outcomes. Panghuling tanong, in your opinion, what are the advantages of using performance task assessment? What are the disadvantages? So, performance task assessment offers several advantages in evaluating individual skills, knowledge, and abilities in a real-world context. However, it also comes with its own set of disadvantages. Overall, performance task assessments offers valuable insights into individuals' abilities and competencies. It is essential to consider the advantages and disadvantages to ensure a balanced and effective assessment approach that aligns with the intended learning outcomes and objectives. Sa advantages, dito papasok yung authentic assessment, holistic evaluation, engagement, transferability, and then yung feedback. Sa disadvantages naman, papasok yung subjectivity, time-consuming, scoring, reliability, resource-intensive, at limited coverage. Once again, ako po si Angelie Cruz, reporting for the lesson 3 for the designing performance task. To continue po this lesson, papasok po dito si Ma'am Dannalyn to provide more information regarding with the designing performance task. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I'm Dannalyn Monteza and I will continue to discuss the topic in Lesson 3, which is Designing Performance Tasks. Now, let's move on to the abstract and apply of this lesson. So, the abstract and apply of this lesson, it is helpful to think of performance tasks as mini, midi, and maxi tasks when considering the length of time and amount of effort for each task. So first, we have mini assessments. Mini assessments are quick tasks that are designed only for a single class period. It helps students to acquire important information while providing teacher with crucial feedback. One of example of these are quick dialogues with the teacher. Second, we have midi assessments. Midi assessments are performance tasks that require 2 to 3 class periods to complete. Some example of these are writing and revising articles, drawing comic strips, etc. And lastly, we have maxi assessments, are performance tasks that require more than 3 class periods to complete. Usually, there are culminating projects of what the student have learned in a specific amount of time. Some example of these are rehearsing and performing short plays or scenes, writing a short story, creating scrapbooks, and etc. by Johnson and Penny and also Gordon 2009. By categorizing performance tasks into mini, midi, and maxi tasks, educators can effectively plan and implement assessments that align with the time constraints and learning objectives of their students. Performance task assessment may be in the form of, number 1 is visual representation tasks. Second is written tasks. Third, oral presentation tasks, and also 4. Large-scale project or performances. So number 1 is visual representation tasks. This type of assessment involves tasks that require students to create visual representation such as comic strips, graphic organizer, electronic presentation, and other visual aids. This task assesses student ability to convey information and ideas visually, enhancing their creativity and communication skills. Second, we have written tasks. Written tasks assess a student's ability to express their thoughts, ideas, and knowledge effectively through written communication. This form of assessment may include essays, reports, reflection, and other written assignments that demonstrate student comprehension and analytical skills. And third, we have oral presentation tasks. Oral presentation tasks evaluate students' ability to communicate verbally and present information in a clear and engaging manner. Students may be required to deliver speeches, presentation, debates, or discussion to demonstrate their speaking and presentation skills. And last but not the least, we have large-scale project or performances. These assessments involves comprehensive projects or performances that showcase student integrated understanding of a topic or concept. Examples include group projects, research papers, performances, exhibition, or any task that requires a significant amount of time and effort to complete. The goal of this activity is for you to formulate a scheme that uses performance task assessment to evaluate your students' learnings. For each of your class learning outcomes, list down the most appropriate performance task to measure whether the student has achieved the said outcome or not. These tasks may be visual presentation tasks, written tasks, or representation tasks, or large-scale projects. So now, let's proceed to create a matrix aligning the task to the suitable learning outcome. So meron po akong ginawang matrix aligning the task to the suitable learning outcome. So first, task number 1, example, in objective, compose sentences using keywords in the student's mother tongue. In the prompt, teacher asks a question, and the response is specific task, oral performance, substantive dialogue, and the method for rating is checklist of keywords used. Task 2 is the objective is analyze the sequence of events in a story, and the prompt teacher will give the story to be analyzed, and the response specific task is written performance. Analyze the sequence of events in the given story. Oral performance discuss the analysis, and method for rating is score based on the depth of analysis and coherence of discussion. And the task 3, we have objective, create a visual representation of a historical events. And the prompt is teacher present a historical events. And the response specific task is visual performance. Create a graphic organizer, timeline, or visual representation of the historical event. And the method for rating is evaluation based on accuracy, creativity, and clarity of the visual representation. And last, task 4 in objective is deliver an oral presentation on a scientific concept. From is teacher assign a scientific concept. And the response is specific task, oral performance. Deliver a presentation explaining the scientific concept, and the method for rating is rubric assessing content understanding, presentation delivery, and engagement with the audience. So, the lesson synthesis of this lesson have a 3 questions. So, first is, in your own words, how will you define a performance task? A performance task can be defined as an assessment that requires students to demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and understanding through the completion of a specific task or project. It goes beyond traditional tests or quizzes by focusing on real-world application and performance, allowing students to showcase their abilities and apply what they have learned in meaningful ways. The second question is, if there were no observable behaviors, how will the teacher grade his or her students? If there were no observable behaviors, grading students will become challenging for the teacher. Observable behaviors are essential in assessing student performance and determining their level of understanding. Without observable behaviors, the teacher would have limited evidence to assess student mastery of the learning objectives and provide meaningful feedback. Observable behaviors provide tangible evidence of students' abilities, allowing the teacher to evaluate their performance and progress. The third question is, what would happen to the class if there were no performance tasks? If there were no performance tasks in the class, several consequences could arise. Firstly is students may be limited to traditional forms of assessment such as tests or quizzes, which may not fully capture their understanding and skills. Performance tasks provide an opportunity for students to apply their learning to real-life situations, think critically, solve problems, and communicate effectively. Without performance tasks, students may miss out on the chance to develop and showcase their creativity, critical thinking, and problem-solving abilities. Performance tasks also promote engagement, and active participation in the learning process. Without these tasks, the classroom environment may become more passive and less dynamic, potentially hindering student overall growth and development. Performance tasks provide a holistic and comprehensive approach to assessing student learning outcomes, allowing for a more well-rounded and meaningful educational experience. And that's all my report. Thank you for listening.
Good day, learners. I'm Zaragoza and I am pleased to meet you today for another wonderful discussion. Our discussion for today is Lesson 4, Grading Performance Task, and is part of Unit 4 entitled Assessing Student Learning for the Mother Tongue. Without further ado, let's jump into the lesson's objectives. At the end of the lesson, you are expected to describe the 5 principles of language assessment, recite the definition of a rubric, identify its parts, and discuss its advantages and disadvantages. Third is to compare and contrast an analytic and a holistic rubric, and lastly is to construct your own rubric with the appropriate characteristics of each criterion and each description. So again, I am Zaragoza and I formally welcome you for today's discussion. Grading performance task involves a multifaceted approach that goes beyond simple right or wrong answers. It requires evaluating learners' ability to apply knowledge, skills, and critical thinking to real-world scenarios. According to Benner, Brown, and Jeffrey, using competency rubrics in education, as advocated by the Center for American Progress, involves creating assessment tools that outline specific skills or competencies learners are expected to demonstrate. For example, in a history class, a competency rubric might include criteria such as research skills, critical thinking, and communication. Each criterion would have different levels of proficiency, allowing learners to fully understand what is expected of them and providing a clear roadmap for improvement. By utilizing these rubrics, educators can shift towards a more student-centered approach, where learners are actively involved in their own learning and have a clear understanding of how to succeed. Through thoughtful assessment criteria and feedback, educators can effectively measure the learner's comprehension, problem-solving abilities, and overall performance. Before we move on to the next topic, let us define what is rubrics. Rubrics are scoring guides or assessment tools that outline criteria for evaluating learners' work or performance. They define the expectations for quality and proficiency in a particular task or skill by breaking it down into specific components or dimensions. Rubrics typically include descriptions of different levels of performance for each criterion, ranging from excellent to poor, allowing for a clear and consistent assessment process. Also, rubrics are commonly used in education to provide feedback to learners, guide instruction, and ensure fairness and transparency in grading. Now that we know the definition of rubric, let's now discuss its parts and their functions. First is the criteria. These are the specific elements or dimensions of performance that are being evaluated in the rubric. Each criterion represents a distinct aspect of the task or assignment that contributes to the overall assessment. Criteria are typically determined based on the learning objectives and expectations for the assignment. Next is the levels of achievement. These are the different ratings or levels used to evaluate performance on each criterion. These levels typically range from low to high or novice to expert, providing a spectrum of achievement. Descriptors are used to outline the expectations for performance at each level, helping assessors differentiate between levels of achievement. The third part of a rubric is the descriptors. Descriptors are clear, observable indicators of what constitutes performance at each level of achievement. They provide detailed explanation of the characteristics or qualities associated with each level, helping assessors or the educators to understand and apply the criteria consistently. Descriptors may include specific examples or behaviors that illustrate performance at each level. Lastly is the overall score. This is the final score or rating given to the student based on their performance across all criteria. The overall score may be calculated by aggregating scores from individual criteria, where each criterion is weighted based on its importance, or it may be determined using a holistic judgment approach where the assessor or the educators considers the overall quality of the learner's work in relation to the rubric criteria. The overall score provides a summary evaluation of the learner's performance on the assignment. While rubrics can be valuable tools for assessment, it's essential to be aware of its advantages and disadvantages for us to be ready for its potential drawbacks and to use them thoughtfully to ensure fair and meaningful evaluation for student work. So let us discuss its advantages and disadvantages. First, there are 4 advantages that I have researched. The first is to clarity and transparency. Rubrics offer clear guidelines and criteria for assessment, which helps learners understand exactly what is expected of them. By outlining specific expectations, rubrics promote transparency in the grading process, reducing ambiguity and ensuring the learners know how they will be evaluated. This transparency can alleviate anxiety and confusion among learners as they have a clear understanding of why they need to do to succeed. Second is consistency. Rubrics provide a standardized framework for assessment, which helps ensure that all students are evaluated fairly and consistently. By breaking down the assessment criteria into distinct components or parts, rubrics make it easier for the educators or assessors to objectively evaluate the learner's work. This consistency is essential for fairness in grading as it reduces the potential for bias or subjective interpretation. The third advantage of using a rubric is the feedback. Rubrics facilitate targeted feedback by identifying specific strengths and areas for improvement in learners' work. Assessors or the educator can use the criteria outlined in the rubric to provide constructive feedback that is directly related to the learning objectives. This feedback is more meaningful and actionable for learners as it is tied to specific aspects of their performance outlined in the rubric. Additionally, rubrics help learners understand why they receive a particular grade, enabling them to learn from their mistakes and make improvements in future assignments or performance tasks. Fourth is learning outcomes. By using rubrics, learners gain a clear understanding of the learning objectives and criteria for success in a given activity or assignment. Rubrics communicate the expectations for what students should know and be able to do, helping them align their efforts with the desired learning outcomes. This clarity enhances the learning experiences by providing learners with a roadmap for achieving success. Moreover, when learners understand how their work will be evaluated, they are more likely to engage in meaningful learning activities that support their academic growth.
There is no such a perfect tool, so still, amidst of its many advantages, rubric still has some disadvantages. First is, it is time consuming. Developing rubrics requires careful consideration of the learning objectives, assessment criteria, and descriptors. It can be time-consuming to ensure that the rubric accurately reflects what students are expected to demonstrate. Additionally, using rubrics to assess the learner's work requires time to evaluate each submission against the criteria outlined in the rubric. Next is rigidness. Critics argue that rubrics may oversimplify tasks by breaking them down into discrete criteria, potentially stifling creativity. When specific criteria are prescribed, learners may focus solely on meeting those requirements rather than exploring alternative approaches or thinking critically and creatively about the task. Third disadvantage of using a rubric is subjectivity. Despite attempts to standardize assessment criteria, there is often a degree of subjectivity involved, especially when using qualitative descriptors. Different assessors or educators may interpret the descriptors differently, leading to inconsistencies in grading. This subjectivity can undermine the reliability of rubric-based assessments. Lastly is potential for misuse. Rubrics, if not used effectively, can lead to superficial assessment practices. Assessors may prioritize ticking boxes on the rubric rather than engaging in a thorough evaluation of the learner's work. Additionally, rubrics may discourage holistic assessment, where the overall quality of the work is considered rather than just meeting specific criteria outlined in the rubric. In this sample rubric, each part represents a different aspect of the assessment. First is the content, which contains 25%. Refers to the substance or the information presented in the project. It could include the accuracy, the depth, and the relevance of the content to the topic. Next is the objective, which also contains 25% of the overall score. This likely refers to how well the project meets its intended objectives or learning goals. It could encompass whether the project fulfills the requirements and objectives set forth by the assignment or the curriculum. Next is the organization, the 20%. This assesses how well the project is structured and presented. It could include factors such as clarity of ideas, logical flow, and coherence of the content. Next is method or approach, which contains 20%. This evaluates the methodology or approach used to complete the project. It could include factors such as research methods, problem-solving strategies, or techniques applied in completing the task. Lastly is the creativity, which contains 10%. This measures the originality and innovative aspects of the project. It could include unique ideas, novel solutions, or creative presentation formats. Each category is assigned a weight percentage, indicating its relative importance in the overall assessment. These percentages are used to calculate the total score for the project based on the performance in each category. This sample rubric also has its own level of achievement. These are the excellent, satisfactory, and poor. Excellence are the aspects of the performance that exceeds the expectations. This means the learner's performance excels in these areas, demonstrating their exceptional skills, knowledge, and efficiency. Next is satisfactory. In these areas, the learners meets the basic requirements or criteria, but there's still room for improvement. This means that the learners perform adequately, but there may be areas where they could be more efficient, effective, or thorough. It's a signal that the learners is on the right track, but there is still work to be done to reach excellence. Last is the poor. This indicates areas where the performance falls short of expectations. The learners do not meet the required standards, and there's a need for significant improvement. It could be due to a lack of skill, knowledge, effort, or other factors. Identifying these areas allows the learners to focus on specific areas for growth and development. So now, having this knowledge, let's proceed to the checklist for evaluating a rubric. It has 10 features of a quality rubric. First is a rubric has a clear, essential criteria. This means that the rubric clearly defines what is expected of the students in terms of performance or achievement. Next is alignment with standards or competencies. This means that the criteria in the rubric should be directly connected to the standards or competencies outlined in the curriculum or instructional plan. Third is realistic number of criteria. Your rubric should not have an overwhelming number of criteria, but instead, focus on the key aspects of performance. Fourth is explicit observable indicators. Each level of performance on the rubric should have a specific, observable indicators that clearly demonstrate the quality of student work. Fifth is no overlaps in levels. This means that each level on the rubric should be distinct, without ambiguity or overlap between adjacent levels. Sixth is real-world criteria. The criteria should reflect skills or abilities that are relevant and applicable to real-world situations or contexts. The seventh is high interjudge reliability. Different assessors should arrive at similar judgment when using the rubric to evaluate student work, indicating consistency and reliability in the assessment process. The eighth quality rubric is tested out with learners or with students. The rubric should be piloted or tested with learners to ensure its effectiveness and usability in assessing their work. Ninth is the avoidance of degree modifiers. The language used in the rubric should avoid vague terms like good or excellent and instead focus on specific performance indicators. Lastly is written in a way that can be understood by the learners or by the students. The language and terminology used in the rubrics should be clear and accessible to learners so they understand what is expected of them in their work.
Now, for you to fully understand how to grade performance tasks, here is Miss Michelle Garachico to further discuss you the lesson 4.
Good day everyone, especially our professor, Ma'am Cruz. I'm Michelle T. Garachico and I will be continue to discuss the lesson 4, Grading Performance Tasks, Abstract, the Analytic and Holistic Rubric. Rubrics are often organized in a table or matrix format. Teachers may use this to grade students while pupils may use it to plan their work, Dawson 2017. When used as a tool for formative assessment, these have been proven to have a positive effect on students' learning by Pandero and Johnson 2013. A rubric is a scoring tool na ginagamit sa pag-evaluate ng student assessments. Nagpro-provide ito ng clear and objective way para ma-assess ang student work by listing criteria and describing levels of quality ng bawat kriterion. Tinutulungan nila ang mga learners to understand how they will be evaluated and how they can demonstrate their knowledge. Hinahati ng rubrics ang assessment into smaller parts, allowing for a detailed evaluation of learners' performance. Sa paggamit ng rubrics, teachers can communicate their expectations to learners at makakapagbigay sila ng feedback that helps learners na ma-improve ang kanilang work or task. Example sa essay, ang teacher ay gagamit ng rubrics para ma-assess ang essay ng kanyang students sa isa specific na topic. These rubrics includes criteria like content, organization, language use, and mechanics with different levels of quality. Ang excellent essay ay nagde-demonstrate sa deep understanding, strong evidence, and originality. Ang proficient essay ay mayroong etiquette o sapat na evidence and examples. At ang developing essay naman ay lacks, kulang, or walang strong evidence and examples. By using rubrics, teachers are able to let learners understand what is expected of them at magbigay layunin ng feedback na nagbibigay daan sa mga teachers and learners to understand expectations, set goals, and evaluate their work. There are two types of rubrics, analytic and holistic rubrics. Analytic rubric. An analytic rubric is a structured assessment tool that helps evaluate students' performance on a particular assignment or task. It breaks down the assignment into specific skills or criteria that need to be demonstrated. Each skill or criterion is then further divided into different levels of performance, typically ranging from low to high. Sa paggamit ng analytic rubric, ang teachers ay makakapag-provide ng more specific feedback sa mga learners at ma-identify ang strengths and weaknesses ng performance ng mga learners in different areas. Ang type ng rubric na ito ay also allows for a more objective and consistent evaluation ng student work, as it focuses sa specific skills rather than an overall impression. Ito ang isang example ng analytic rubric at ito ay binubuo ng mga parts. First is ang title. This indicates what this rubric is all about. Description. It specifies the details of what the task is to be produced or performed by the students. Sa first column, may kita ang criteria or components. It shows in what aspect the student will be marked. This also indicates what factors we will look for in students for their performance. Scale or scoring shows different levels or levels of mastery of students in each criteria or component. Through this, ma-assess ang mga mag-aaral quantitatively and qualitatively. Ito yung mga poor, satisfactory, and excellent na tinatawag din na quantitative values and qualitative skills. Performance descriptor. Describing or defining the quality of performance shown or demonstrated by students in each criteria or component or each scale or scoring. Sa paggamit ng analytic rubric, ang unang titignan ay ang criteria or component. Titignan kung saan criteria tutugma ang performance ng student, gayon din sa performance descriptor kung saan tumutugma ang kanyang performance. Example, let's say the student's performance is satisfactory. Ang magiging score niya ay 2 para sa particular na component na iyon. Gayon din ang gagawin sa iba pang criteria na mayroon sa analytic rubric. After the student's performance in each criteria is marked, all the students' scores in each criteria will be added to find out the student's total score in that performance. Ang analytic rubric ay tumutulong sa students to understand the different components of an assignment at nagpo-provide sa kanila ng clear guidelines for achieving different levels of proficiency in each skills. Ito ay nagpo-promote ng transparency, fairness, and support students in their learning and improvement process. The holistic rubric. A holistic rubric is an evaluation tool that assesses student work by considering all criteria together. It uses a single scale to assign a score based on an overall judgment of the work. Instead of assigning separate scores for each criterion, a holistic rubric assigns a single score based on an overall judgment of the student's work. Ang holistic rubric ay nagbibigay sa mga students ng clear expectations, comprehensive feedback, and encourage self-reflection. Nagpo-provide ito sa mga students ng clear understanding sa criteria na gagamitin sa pag-evaluate sa task ng mga learners. Nag-aalaw sa kanila to focus on meeting those expectations. Teachers benefit from a standardized evaluation process na nagpo-promote sa consistency across different students and ensuring sa fairness ng grading. Ito ang example ng holistic rubric at ito ay may mga bahagi. Una ay title, indicating what the rubric is all about. Description, detailing what tasks students are required to perform. Scale and scoring, which can be placed on the top and side of the rubric that is also used with a qualitative and quantitative scale, can also be a combination of these two. Performance descriptor, it indicates a combined and generalized description of the possible performance of each student. In fact, it is the combined descriptor of each criteria or component that will be looked for in the students in order for them to get that mark. Sa paggamit ng holistic rubric, the evaluator would assess the students' reflection papers sa pamagitan ng considering sa overall quality and assign a single score na nire-range from 1 to 4. Ang score ang nagre-reflect sa judgment ng evaluator sa students' performance as a whole, taking into account all the criteria outlined in the rubric. A holistic rubric simplifies the evaluation process by considering all criteria together at sa assigning single score base sa overall judgment ng student's work. Ito ay nag-aalaw sa comprehensive and holistic evaluation of the performance or project. Here's the guide question for analytic rubric and holistic rubrics. Number 1. Are there similar parts between an analytic and a holistic rubric? What are these? Yes, at ang una dito ay ang criteria. Criteria, this outline what is expected from the student's work. Included ito sa both analytic and holistic rubrics. Ito ang nagde-define sa specific aspects or skills being assessed. Next is performance level. This provides a clear description of what is expected at each level of performance. Both types of rubrics ay mayroong different levels or categories na naka-indicate ang varying levels of achievement for each criterion. Last is overall judgment. While the focus of evaluation differs, both rubrics involve an overall judgment of the student's work. Sa analytic rubric, separate ang score na naka-assign for each criterion and then combine to determine an overall score. In a holistic rubric, a single score is assigned based on a overall assessment of the work. What are the difference between an analytic and a holistic rubric? First is evaluation focused. An analytic rubric assess the student's work by breaking it down into specific criteria or components. Ang bawat criterion is evaluated separately at ang scores are assigned for each criterion. Ang focus nito is on assessing different aspects or skills individually. Samantalang sa holistic rubric, a holistic rubrics evaluates the student's work as a whole considering all criteria together. Pina-provide nito ang single score based on the overall judgment of the quality or performance. The focus is on overall impression and impact of the work. Feedback and specificity. An analytic rubric provides detailed feedback by evaluating each criterion separately. It allows for specific feedback on strengths and areas for improvement in each criterion. Magre-receive ang students ng more specific information about their performance sa iba't ibang aspeto ng kanilang task. Sa holistic rubric, a holistic rubric provides less specific feedback as it evaluates the work as a whole. It offers a general assessment of the overall quality or performance. Ang students ay makaka-receive ng feedback sa overall impression and impact of their work without detailed feedback on the specific criteria. Scoring process. Sa analytic rubric, separate ang scores or ratings are assigned for each criterion. These scores are often weighted or averaged to calculate an overall score for the work. Sa holistic rubric, a single score is assigned based on a overall judgment of the work. The evaluator considers all criteria collectively and assigns a single score that reflects the overall quality or performance. Complexity and time. Analytic rubric can be more complex and time-consuming to develop as they require defining and evaluating multiple criteria separately. Angkop sila for assessing complex tasks or assignment with multiple components. Sa holistic rubrics are generally simpler and quicker to develop as they assess the work as a whole. They are suitable for assessing tasks or assignments where the overall impression and impact are more important compared sa individual criteria. Analytic rubrics provide more detailed feedback and allow for a comprehensive evaluation of different criteria, while holistic rubrics offer a broader assessment of the overall quality or performance. What are the advantages of using an analytic rubric and what are its disadvantages? An analytic rubric is a tool that helps assess the quality of students' work by breaking down the criteria into specific components and providing a detailed description of each level of performance. Here's the advantages and disadvantages of using an analytic rubric. Advantages. Number 1. An analytic rubric provides clear and specific criteria for evaluation. Mas madali para sa both teacher and students to understand what is expected. Number 2, it allows for more detailed and targeted feedback as each component of the criteria is assessed and separately. Tinutulungan nito ang mga learners to understand their strengths and weaknesses in different areas. Number 3, analytic rubrics promotes fairness and consistency in grading as they provide a standardized framework for evaluation. This reduces the potential for bias or subjective judgment. Last, 4, analytic rubrics can be used as a learning tool. Ito ay nagpo-provide ng clear understanding of the expectation and allow them to self-assess of their work against the criteria. Disadvantages. Number 1, creating and using analytic rubrics can be time-consuming, especially kapag nag-a-assess ng complex tasks or large numbers of students. It requires careful consideration and detailed descriptions para sa bawat level ng performance. 2. Analytic rubrics focus on specific criteria and may not capture the overall quality and creativity of a student's work. This can limit the holistic assessment of a task. Despite the attempt to provide clear criteria, there is still room for subjectivity in scoring. Different evaluators may interpret the descriptors differently, leading to inconsistent grading. 4. Analytic rubrics may not accommodate unexpected or unique aspects of students' work that do not fit within the predefined criteria. This can limit the flexibility of assessment. What are the advantages of using a holistic rubric and what are its disadvantages? A holistic rubric is a tool that assesses the overall quality of a student's work based on the overall impression or global judgment. Here are the advantages and disadvantages of using a holistic rubric. Advantages. Number 1, holistic rubrics are quicker and easier to use compared to analytic rubrics. Since nakafocus ito sa overall impressions, evaluators can assess a student's work more efficiently. 2. Holistic rubrics are less complex and require less detailed descriptions compared to analytic rubrics. This simplicity makes them easier to understand and use for both teachers and students. Number 3, holistic rubrics allow for flexibility and assessing complex or creative tasks that may not fit within predefined criteria. Ito ay nagbibigay opportunity sa kanila to consider the overall impact and unique aspects of a student's work. 4. Holistic rubrics provide a holistic assessment of a student's work, considering the overall quality, coherence, and effectiveness. This can capture the overall impression and essence of the work. Disadvantages: holistic rubrics do not provide detailed feedback on specific criteria or components of the work. This can make it challenging for students to understand their strengths and weaknesses in different areas. 2. Holistic rubrics rely on subjective judgment and interpretation by the evaluator. Different evaluators ay mayroong different interpretations of the overall quality, leading to inconsistency in grading. Since holistic rubrics focus on overall impressions, they may not provide specific feedback on areas that need improvement. Students may miss out on detailed guidance for their growth and development. 4. The subjective nature of holistic rubrics can introduce bias in the assessment process. Ang evaluators ay maaaring maimpluwensyahan mula sa personal preference, biases, or preconceived notions na maaaring maka-affect sa fairness of the evaluation. The next reporter will Miss Sofia Alexis Bautista to discuss the apply of this lesson.
To have a reliable rubric, each criterion should process certain characteristics. First, it should be appropriate, meaning it aligns with the task or skill being assessed. Secondly, it should be definable, allowing for clear understanding and measurement. Thirdly, it should be observable, meaning it can be seen or demonstrated in some way. Fourthly, each criterion should be distinct from one another, ensuring they access different aspects of performance. Fifthly, the criteria should be complete, covering all relevant aspects of the task or skill. Lastly, they should be able to support description along the continuum of quality, meaning they can differentiate between different levels of performance. Additionally, the description for each criterion should also possess certain characteristics. Firstly, it should be descriptive, providing specific details about what is expected. Secondly, it should be clear, leaving no room for confusion. Thirdly, it should be cover the whole range of performance, capturing both lower and higher levels of achievement. Fourthly, it should be distinguished among all levels, allowing for differentiation between different levels of proficiency. Fifthly, it should be centered the target performance at the level, ensuring description matches the desired standard. Lastly, it should feature parallel description from level to level, maintaining consistency and comparability across different levels of performance. Construct a rubric by following the steps below. Step 1 is task. Choose the performance task you want to assess, such as writing, speaking, drama, or long-term project. For example, if the task is writing an essay, the rubric would focus on assessing the student writing skills. Step 2. Criteria. Determine at least 5 criteria that are relevant to judging the performance of the task. These criteria should reflect the competencies demonstrated by the student while completing the task. For instance, if the task is writing an essay, the criteria could include organization, context, language, usage, or structure and creativity. The third step is scale. Decide on the levels of scale to measure the student performance. You can use labels like excellent, satisfactory, or poor. Let's say we choose a 5-level scale: excellent, proficiency, average, below average, and poor. The last step is description. Formulate description for each criterion at each scale level. For example, if we have 5 criteria and 3 scale levels, we will write a total of 15 description. Here's an example of the criterion content at the different scale levels. We will give a student an excellent if the essay demonstrates deep understanding of the topic with well-developed and insightful ideas supported by the strong evidence. Proficient for the essay shows a good understanding of the topic with clear and coherent ideas supported by relevant evidence. And for the average, the essays demonstrate a basic understanding of the topic with some coherent ideas and limited evidence. For below average, the essays lack of clear understanding of the topic with weak ideas and for below average, the essays lacks of clear understanding of the topic with weak ideas and insufficient evidence. And lastly, for the poor, the essay shows of lack of understanding of the topic with an incoherent ideas and no supporting evidence. Remember that each description should have parallel wording across the different scale levels. This helps ensure consistency and fairness in evaluating student performance. And by following these steps and providing clear description, you can create a rubric that effectively assesses and evaluates student performance in the chosen task.